I don't sleep facing the closet anymore. I'm saying that up front because if I try to ease into it, I'll lose my nerve. And if I lose my nerve, I'll convince myself this is stupid and delete the recording. So there it is. That's the rule I live by now. Bed positioned sideways. Pillow turned just enough that I never have to see that door when I close my eyes. If you're wondering what changed, good. You're supposed to. I used to wonder the same thing about people who had rules like that. People who taped over mirrors, or slept with lights on, or refused to stand with their back to a doorway. I thought they were dramatic. I thought fear like that came from imagination, not experience. The closet door is open a few inches as I'm talking. I know that because I checked. I always check. It doesn't move when I look at it. It doesn't creak or swing or do anything obvious. That would almost be easier. What it does instead is wait. The air around it feels different, heavier somehow, like the room is holding its breath along with me. I can't prove there's anything inside. That's the worst part. There's no hand reaching out, no shape pressed against the slats, no shadow doing anything a shadow shouldn't. Just the sense that if I stare too long, something will notice that I'm paying attention. Something that understands what attention means. I learned early on that looking is a mistake. Not opening it, just looking. Letting your eyes rest there for more than a second. Letting your mind finish the thought it starts forming on its own. I ignored that instinct. I ignored the warnings that didn't sound like warnings yet. Nothing dramatic happened the first time. That's how it gets you. It lets you think you're safe. It lets you think you imagine the whole thing. It gives you enough quiet to relax, enough normal to lower your guard, enough time to convince yourself that fear is something you can reason your way out of if you're careful. That was before I learned how quiet a room can become when it's waiting for you to notice something you were never meant to see, and how fast normal habits turn into survival rules when fear settles. I don't make that mistake anymore. Before all of this, before I knew better, my bedroom was just a bedroom, and the closet was just a place where I kept my clothes. Before everything changed, my bedroom was the one place in my life that felt predictable. Not happy, not perfect, just controlled. I lived alone in a small apartment that always smelled faintly of dust and old carpet cleaner, the kind of place where every sound from the hallway felt closer than it should. The bedroom was the exception. Once I closed that door, the world stayed out. My routine never varied much. I'd shower too late, scroll on my phone too long, tell myself I'd sleep after one more video, and eventually give up around 2 or 3 in the morning. Insomnia had been part of my life long enough that I treated it like an annoying roommate. We ignored each other most nights. Sometimes we argued. Neither of us ever moved out. The bed was positioned directly across from the closet, mostly because there wasn't anywhere else to put it. Small apartments don't offer choices, just compromises. From where I slept, I could see the entire closet door without lifting my head. White paint, cheap handle, slightly crooked from when I'd overstuffed it years earlier. It stuck sometimes. I told myself I'd fix it and never did. That closet held nothing interesting. Clothes I didn't wear anymore. A box of cables I refused to throw away. Old shoes, a vacuum attachment I didn't own the vacuum for. It was clutter, not mystery. If anything, it annoyed me. I hated how the door never closed quite right unless you nudged it with your foot. I slept facing it because that was the most comfortable position. Simple as that. I liked being able to see the room. It made me feel grounded. Like nothing could surprise me if my eyes were already open to it. I used to think that was smart. People say you shouldn't sleep facing doors or windows, but I always assumed that was superstition, leftovers from a time when darkness meant danger. There was a sense of ownership in that room. I knew every creak in the floor, every hum in the walls when the pipes kicked on. Even the silence felt familiar. When you live alone long enough, silence stops being empty and starts being something you can read. That's why I didn't question it the first night I noticed something was different. Not wrong, just different. The room felt off, like a word on the tip of your tongue that refuses to surface. Nothing had moved. Nothing looked unusual. The closet door was closed, exactly how I'd left it. I remember lying there, staring at it, trying to figure out why I couldn't relax, and telling myself I was just tired. That was the first lie I believed. The first sound was so small I almost missed it. I was lying on my side, facing the closet, staring at the faint reflection of my phone's charging light on the door, when I heard something shift. Not a bang, not a thump, just the quiet whisper of fabric brushing against fabric, like someone adjusting their weight in a chair. I told myself it was the clothes. They hang weird when the air kicks on. Old apartments breathe, that's what people say. Walls expand. Wood settles. I even whispered it out loud, because saying it made it feel official. It's settling, I said, and waited for my heart to slow down. It didn't. A few minutes passed, or maybe it was longer. Time does strange things when you're trying not to listen. I almost rolled over and faced the wall, but stubbornness kept me still. I didn't want to give fear the satisfaction. That's what it felt like then. Fear, not warning. Then I heard it again. Softer this time. Closer. A faint sound, like breath passing through teeth, careful and controlled. I held mine without thinking. The room went painfully quiet, and for a moment I was sure I'd imagined the whole thing. I laughed under my breath. A short, humorless sound. Old hinges, I muttered, even though the door hadn't moved. The closet stayed shut, perfectly still, like it was offended by the accusation. I lay there cataloging explanations the way you do when panic starts creeping in. Air pressure, muscle twitch, a neighbor closing a door. Anything but the idea forming in the back of my mind. The one that felt childish just for existing. The sound came a third time, unmistakably different. Not movement this time, but presence. A shift that suggested intention. I could feel my skin tighten, every instinct screaming at me to look away. That's when I noticed something that should have reassured me, but didn't. When I finally rolled onto my other side, turning my back to the closet, the room fell silent. Not gradually, instantly. I stayed like that for a long time, afraid to test it again. Afraid that if I turned back and listened too closely, I'd confirm something I wasn't ready to understand. Because noticing, I realized, wasn't harmless. I lay there replaying the sound in my head, trying to decide which part scared me more, what I'd heard, or how quickly my brain had started adapting to it. Part of me wanted to test it again, just to be sure, just to prove I was still in control. Another part warned me that control was an illusion, that the room hadn't changed at all. I had. I was listening differently now, straining for meaning instead of noise. The thoughts settled into my chest like a weight. Whatever was happening didn't need to be loud. It only needed me to notice it, and once I did, pretending I hadn't felt impossible. That realization lingered, sour and persistent, marking the moment when curiosity quietly crossed a line and became something much harder to ignore than fear ever had before. Noticing was the invitation. It didn't happen every night at first. That would have been too obvious. Instead, it slipped into my routine the way bad habits do, quietly enough that you don't notice until it's already part of you. One night, there would be a sound. The next, nothing. Silence, so complete it made me feel foolish for being nervous in the first place. I started paying attention, not in a panicked way, not yet. More like curiosity. Scientific, I told myself. If I faced the closet, something shifted. A faint pressure in the room, like the air thickening. Sometimes a soft movement. Sometimes just the sense that the space between me and the door had shortened. When I turned away, it stopped. Cleanly. Like flipping a switch. I tested it the way you test a sore tooth, pressing just enough to confirm it still hurts. I'd lie facing the wall for a while, letting my breathing even out, convincing myself I was calm. Then, slowly, I'd roll onto my other side and look at the closet. Not stare, just look. The response wasn't immediate. That felt important. Whatever was happening didn't rush. It waited until I settled, until my eyes adjusted, until my attention fully landed on the door. Only then would the room change. Not visually, physically. The silence would gain weight. My ears would ring slightly, the way they do in an empty building. Once, I swore the mattress dipped, just a fraction, like someone had leaned a hand against it. Every time, the same result. Facing the closet invited something. Facing away dismissed it. No escalation. No punishment. Just consistency. That consistency scared me more than chaos would have. It suggested intention. Awareness. I started sleeping with my phone face down, screen dark, afraid even reflected light might count as looking. I stopped letting my eyes drift when I woke up in the night. I learned how to roll over without glancing in that direction, like avoiding eye contact with a stranger you don't want to engage. Without meaning to, I'd created rules. Don't face the closet too long. Don't focus on it. Don't acknowledge whatever responds when you do. I didn't write them down. I didn't say them out loud, but I followed them religiously. For a while, that worked. Nights passed without incident. I almost relaxed, almost convinced myself the pattern was stress, sleep deprivation, and overactive imagination filling in gaps. That confidence felt good, dangerous in hindsight, because once you believe you understand something, curiosity comes back. It whispers that you're safe now. That one more test won't hurt. That rules only matter if you're breaking them for no reason. I told myself I was being careful. That awareness was the same thing as control. I kept track of nights, of reactions, of the exact position of my body, like documenting a problem would stop it from growing teeth. The logic almost worked. Almost. But beneath it ran a quieter thought, one I never said out loud. If it only responds when I look, then it's responding to me. Not the room. Not the dark. Me. That idea followed me through the day, through work, through conversations where I nodded and smiled and felt strangely observed. By the time night came again, fear had blurred into something sharper. Anticipation. I wanted proof. I wanted certainty. I wanted to be wrong more than I wanted to be safe. That desire made the decision feel inevitable then. So one night, when the room felt especially quiet, I rolled onto my side and faced the closet again. Just once more. After a few weeks, the fear stopped being a vague discomfort. It became structured. You learn things through repetition. You learn rules without anyone telling you. Rules that aren't written anywhere. Rules that exist purely because ignoring them has consequences you don't survive to describe. I didn't make them up. They made themselves, imposed by the quiet in the room and the way the closet seemed to wait, patient and exacting. Rule 1. Don't stare. Not too long. Not even a glance that lingers beyond a heartbeat. It's tempting. Curiosity makes you think you're safe. You aren't. The instant your eyes rest there, the room shifts, and you become a participant, not an observer. You might imagine it's nothing. You might tell yourself it's just stress. But the sensation of being watched, like the air itself is weighing on your chest, teaches you fast. Rule 2. Don't speak. Talking doesn't just break the silence. It draws attention. Laughing, muttering, whispering, you name it. Every sound you make invites response, even if that response is nothing tangible. Some nights I've said a word too loudly and felt the mattress dip in answer, a subtle correction, like a teacher nudging a student who's asking questions they shouldn't. Rule 3. Don't acknowledge it. Don't nod. Don't shift your hands toward it. Don't imagine it. Denial isn't about pretending. It's about not giving it power. Awareness is the same as participation. You can't argue with it. You can't negotiate. You can only comply. Rule 4. Though unspoken, emerged naturally. Observe the patterns, measure the nights, track the air. There is comfort in routine, in repetition, in knowing exactly how long you can lie there, how still you must be, when it's safe to breathe normally. Not that anything is truly safe. The closet doesn't care about your sense of safety. It only cares that you understand the rules, or at least that you try. I've recited these rules to myself at night, like prayers. I've imagined posting them online as a guide for others who might make the same mistakes. I've argued silently with anyone who might think it's paranoia. But rules are fragile. They bend. They change. What worked last week may fail tonight. A sound that was harmless before might become a warning. A habit you depended on might become an invitation. By the end of that week, I realized something fundamental. No matter how carefully you follow them, the rules aren't yours. They belong to the thing that waits behind a closet door. And one night, I would learn that even the smallest misstep, the briefest glance, the softest word, the faintest thought, can be enough to rewrite everything you think you know about how to survive. That it wasn't until I mentioned it to someone else that I realized I wasn't imagining it. Not entirely. I was complaining about the noises one night to my neighbor, an older woman named Mrs. Calloway who lived across the hall. I didn't expect sympathy. Usually people just nod politely when you talk about insomnia or creaks in an old building. But she froze when I said, "It only happens when I look at the closet." "You've noticed it too?" she asked, voice low, urgent. Her eyes darted to the floor like she didn't want the walls to hear. I chuckled nervously. "Notice what?" "A closet door." She shook her head sharply. "Not the door. The waiting. You feel it, don't you? Right there. Like it's breathing." I blinked. Breathing? My heart started picking up its pace. The same rhythm I get when I hear the faintest scrape at night. I wanted to laugh it off, but her gaze was serious. Too serious. "It's been in this building for years," she continued. "I first noticed it in my 20s, in a room that wasn't mine. People think it's just a quirk of the building, old wood, wind. But it's more than that. It moves when you look, and it doesn't care about explanations." Her words landed heavily. The casual neighborly conversation I'd expected had morphed into something uncanny, the kind of exchange where normal logic feels useless. I tried to process it. "Years?" I said. "You mean more than one person?" She nodded. "Some report it. Some don't. Some disappear before they can explain. The rest just learn the rules the hard way." She paused, her expression tightening. "You're not the first to notice it. You won't be the last." Later that night, I messaged a stranger in a forum I'd been lurking on, a sub dedicated to unexplained phenomena in apartments, and typed out a careful description of the room, the sounds, the timing, the patterns I'd observed. The reply came almost immediately. "You're not crazy. I've experienced the same. Only I didn't survive the first week as cleanly. Learn your rules." The casual phrasing was terrifying in its implication. Someone else had lived through it, survived, and now issued the same warnings I was grappling with. I spent hours reading other accounts, some detailed, some vague, all unsettling. People describing the same patterns, noticing, testing, breaking rules, consequences. Some mentioned closets, some doors, some rooms that weren't entirely theirs. A growing web of cases, all tied together by this invisible attention that only exists when observed. It was as if every building, every bedroom, every simple piece of furniture could hold its own version of this awareness. By the time I finished reading, my room didn't feel small anymore. It felt like a node in something larger, something patient and ancient and observant. Validation brought no comfort, only a sharp expansion of fear, the knowledge that I wasn't alone in experiencing it, and that fact offered no guarantees of safety. I shut my laptop and looked at the closet. For the first time, the fear wasn't just about tonight. It was about what I might have overlooked, what patterns I hadn't noticed, and what secrets were waiting for me to test them. I couldn't avoid it anymore. I needed answers, and the only way to find them was to confront the pattern, to measure it, to see if I could understand it before it understood me. Once I started looking for answers, I couldn't stop. Avoidance had stopped working anyway. Every quiet night felt heavier than the last, so I did the one thing fear always warns you against. I went searching. Not just casual Googling, but the kind of deep, obsessive trawling that leaves you with too many tabs open and a sinking feeling you can't name. The stories were scattered across old forums, archived posts, half-dead threads no one had replied to in years. They didn't all mention closets. Some talked about doors that wouldn't stay closed. Some about corners of rooms that felt deeper than they should. Others described wardrobes, crawl spaces, stairwells, thresholds. Places that weren't quite rooms, not quite nothing. Someone called them threshold entities, like giving it a name might tame it. What unsettled me most was how similar the progression was. First the noticing, then the testing, then the rules. Almost every account followed that arc, written by people who clearly thought they were being rational at the time. Many posts stopped abruptly, mid-sentence, like the writer had been interrupted. A few had follow-ups from other users asking if the original poster was okay. Those questions never had answers. Some usernames showed up again and again across different threads, years apart, describing the same phenomenon in different apartments, different cities. Either they moved a lot, or whatever this was moved with them. That thought sat badly in my chest. I started checking timestamps, tracking how long each person had lasted once they started documenting it. Days, weeks, rarely longer. There were warnings buried between the anecdotes, written like advice you'd only give if you'd learned it too late. Don't challenge it. Don't record it. Don't assume consistency. Several posts mentioned that the rules changed over time, subtly at first. A sound that once meant nothing would suddenly signal danger. A safe habit would become a mistake without explanation. I bookmarked everything, convinced that information was my shield. If I understood it well enough, I could stay ahead of it. That logic felt solid while the room was bright, and my screen glowed with text and usernames and shared dread. It felt less convincing when I turned the light off and remembered where I was. One thread linked to an older document, a kind of community archive maintained by users who treated these events like cases. Each entry was labeled with a date, a location, and a brief outcome. Moved out. Symptoms ceased. Contact lost. Presumed escalation. The language was clinical, detached, and far more terrifying for it. As I scrolled, a pattern emerged that had nothing to do with the entities themselves. The people who survived longest weren't the bravest or the most curious. They were the ones who stayed afraid. Fear kept them cautious. Fear kept them obedient. Those who grew confident, who started thinking they'd figured it out, tended to vanish from the record shortly after. I realized then that I wasn't reading about something that might happen to me. I was reading about something already in progress. The timestamps lined up too neatly with my own nights of testing and observation. I was mid-pattern, walking a path that others had walked before, convinced I could stop before the end because I knew the map. The last post I read before closing my laptop was short. No context, no story, just a single sentence, written like a warning carved into a wall. It notices when you stop being afraid. I chose the night carefully. That's what I told myself, anyway. As if timing mattered. As if preparation could soften what was coming. I waited until I was exhausted enough that fear felt dull, blunted by routine. I turned off every light, silenced my phone, and lay down facing the closet without hesitation, like ripping off a bandage. At first, nothing happened. The door stayed closed. The room looked the same as it always had. I felt a flicker of relief, quickly followed by irritation. I told myself this was good. Proof. I focused on my breathing, counting seconds, determined not to blink, not to look away, not to give it the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. Minutes passed. Then the air changed. It wasn't a sound at first, but pressure, like altitude sickness, the subtle sense that the room had become smaller without moving any walls. My ears rang faintly. The silence deepened until it felt textured, thick enough to press against my skin. I stayed still, heart pounding, reminding myself that fear was part of the pattern. That fear was expected. The first sound came from inside the closet. Not fabric this time, not settling wood. Something heavier shifted, slow and deliberate, like a body adjusting its stance. The handle trembled once, just enough to notice. My fingers curled into the sheets. I didn't look away. Another movement followed, closer to the door. The sound wasn't loud, but it carried weight, intent. The mattress dipped near my feet, so slightly I almost missed it, and then dipped again. I told myself it was my pulse. I told myself it was nerves. I told myself lies because the alternative was admitting that something unseen was closing distance. The door moved. Not opening, not closing, just enough to break alignment. The frame no longer perfectly straight. A thin line of darkness appeared along the edge, deeper than the shadows around it. The gap didn't widen, but it felt like it was staring back at me, measuring. My thoughts started slipping. The room looked the same, but wrong, like a familiar place rendered from memory instead of reality. The ceiling seemed higher, the walls farther away, the closet door closer. I realized with sudden clarity that it wasn't just reacting anymore. It was learning. Every breath I took, every twitch of muscle, every spike of panic, it absorbed it all. The pauses between sounds grew shorter, as if it were adjusting its timing to mine. When I swallowed, the sound inside mirrored it a second later. When my eyes burned from not blinking, something inside shifted, patient, precise. I understood then that the rules hadn't been about protection. They'd been about delay, about keeping it curious instead of certain. By watching this long, by refusing to look away, I wasn't asserting control. I was giving it data. The handle turned. Not fully, just enough to prove it could. My mouth opened before I could stop myself, a sharp intake of breath that felt like a scream in the silence. The room reacted instantly. The air rushed inward, like pressure equalizing, and the sound from inside the closet stopped completely. For one awful moment, everything was still. Then something pressed against the door from the other side, slow and unmistakable, as if leaning close enough to feel my warmth through the wood. And for the first time since this started, the closet responded directly to me. The night after I broke my rule, I knew something had changed. The closet didn't just respond anymore. It waited for me. Not with movement, not with sound, at least not immediately. It waited with presence, the kind that presses against your awareness until your own heartbeat seems like a betrayal. I lay on my side, pillow hugged to my chest, staring at the door, knowing it was listening, calculating, remembering every twitch, every shallow breath, every flicker of my eyes. And then it spoke, not in words I could fully understand, not in language I could translate. Whispered syllables that echoed inside my skull rather than my ears. Mimicry, my own voice, warped and low, repeating fragments of things I'd thought but never said aloud. Don't look, it said, or maybe I said it myself. It was impossible to tell. My mouth hadn't moved. My thoughts hadn't been that loud. But the sound existed, layered over the hum of the apartment, over the ordinary creaks and sighs of old wood. The room had become a vessel for its attention. I tried to move, to pull the blankets over my head, to close my eyes tightly, but something held me still. Not physically, not yet. It was anticipation, the kind that curls your stomach into knots, that makes limbs heavy and insistent. My rational mind shouted that I could be imagining it, that all the forums, the old posts, the missing usernames, the shared experiences, none of it had to apply to me. But instinct had a louder voice. And then it did something impossible. The closet door shifted by itself, not swinging open, not closing, but angling ever so slightly, just enough that I caught a sliver of darkness inside. A darkness that moved in patterns I'd never noticed, like it was testing my reaction. I understood, suddenly, that it had been learning me all along. Not just my habits, but my expectations, the exact point where fear turns into curiosity, the moment I think I can reclaim control. That understanding alone sent a pulse of panic through me. "You can't leave," the whispers continued, mingling with the movements of the door. It couldn't leave, I realized. It was bound to the threshold, the closet, the room, but only under certain conditions. If I acknowledged it, invited it, mirrored it, I gave it power. If I ignored it, I preserved a fragile standoff. The moment I failed to comply with the unspoken rules, it escalated. And by breaking mine the night before, I had given it the advantage. I tried speaking, carefully. "What do you?" My own voice faltered. Words caught like splinters in my throat. The room reacted instantly. The shadows deepened along the edges of the closet. The darkness shifted toward me in subtle ways, almost imperceptible, and yet my mind screamed in recognition. Every rule I had learned now hung over me like a blade I didn't know how to avoid. I wasn't negotiating. I was exposed. It mirrored me. My shallow breaths became audible echoes, as if my lungs themselves had multiplied. I flinched, and the closet flinched back, the tiniest movements perfectly synchronized. My heart raced, trying to outpace the awareness pressing from the other side of that door. Each mimic made me feel smaller, more observed, more known. By instinct, I wanted to run, to close my eyes, to do anything that would reset the balance. But I knew I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I understood the rules fully. And then it did the unthinkable. It whispered my name. Not softly, not accidentally. My name, spoken clearly, deliberately, in the same pitch and rhythm I might have used talking to myself in the dark. My blood ran cold. The realization hit with full weight. It wasn't just aware of me. It knew me. Every habit, every fear, every misstep. Everything. And knowing me, it had become an extension of the rules themselves. The rules that existed only to trap me in compliance. I thought of the forums, the old threads, the warnings. Survival depends on fear, on awareness, on obeying the unwritten laws. I thought I could test them. I thought I could understand them. Now, looking at the sliver of shifting darkness and hearing the faint echo of my own voice, I understood that knowledge doesn't equal safety. Control is an illusion. Recognition carries its own weight. One misstep, and the balance collapses entirely. Hours passed like seconds, or maybe seconds passed like hours. I couldn't tell anymore. Every movement I made was calculated, every thought measured, because the entity responded to both. I realized in stark clarity that it could only act if I allowed it, if I acknowledged it, if I invited it, if I mirrored its attention. And yet every acknowledgement drew me closer to a threshold I didn't want to cross. By the time my eyelids burned and my body ached from stillness, I faced a desperate choice. Stay paralyzed in observation and hope that fear alone kept me alive, or act in some way, any way, and risk breaking the pattern entirely. The closet waited. It knew my name. It knew the pattern. It knew what I had learned, and what I hadn't. My chest tightened. Every instinct screamed at me to move, but every rational thought begged me to stay still. I stayed, quiet, watching, knowing, and waiting for what I had invited, whether I intended to or not. I survived. That much is true. I didn't vanish like some of the forum posts warned. I didn't disappear overnight, and the closets in other apartments didn't claim me. But surviving doesn't mean I'm whole. The room feels smaller now, tighter somehow, like the walls remember what happened and are pressing closer in silent judgment. The air carries weight, subtle and constant. That wasn't there before. I feel it in the very act of breathing. The rules I learned before aren't enough anymore. They've shifted, tightened. Tiny missteps that used to pass unnoticed now trigger reactions I can't quite anticipate. I sleep only on one side, never facing the closet. I've stopped rolling over at night unless it's absolutely necessary. I've stopped leaving the lights off for more than a few minutes. Every habit has become a measure of survival. Life continues, yes, but it's measured in increments of caution, of avoidance, of whispered calculations about whether my actions might give the thing behind that door an opportunity. Every day, I go through the motions of normal life. Coffee, work, errands. But there's a lingering sense that the apartment is not quite mine. The closet door stands there innocuous, crooked handle, white paint, mundane enough for anyone else to ignore. But I don't ignore it. I can't. I've tried. Every glance carries weight. Every corner hides memory. I move around it with care, almost reverence, almost terror, both at the same time. I think about those who didn't make it, the posts that end abruptly, the warnings ignored. I think about the rules that bend, shift, and expand like living things, reshaping themselves according to attention and action. I think about the nights I tested the boundaries, when curiosity overruled caution, and I remember that the thing inside is patient. It waits. It adapts. It learns. Yet life must continue. Bills are due. Work deadlines exist. People text me, expecting normal responses. I smile, nod, reply pretending. Pretending is a skill I've acquired alongside vigilance. I answer like someone who sleeps peacefully, though the position of my bed tells a different story. I've accepted the new limitations, the awareness that survival comes at a cost. Freedom is measured in what I dare not do. Sometimes, when the room is quiet, I think I hear it. The subtle hum of presence, the air itself bending slightly at the edges of perception. Sometimes I imagine it moving, just out of sight, practicing patience. My pulse quickens instinctively. I've learned again and again that fear is protective now, not paralytic. I'm alive because I remember, because I obey, because I respect what I cannot see. And yet, even in this subdued existence, I feel its gaze, constant and inscrutable. The room is smaller. Life is smaller. But I endure. And I speak now, telling you this, because you might need to know, survival is not victory. It is compromise. And the closet remains, waiting. If you've made it this far, you're probably thinking this is just a story. That it's confined to my apartment, my experience, my mistakes. I wish it were. But the truth is, these rules aren't mine alone. They exist wherever attention falls on a threshold, your closet, your door, even the corner of your room that always feels a little darker. You might think nothing is watching. You might think nothing cares. But it does, quietly, patiently, waiting for you to notice. I'm not here to scare you for fun. I'm here to pass on knowledge that might save you from testing boundaries the way I did. If something feels wrong in your room, if the shadows shift when you blink, if silences wait, don't ignore it. Don't look too long. Don't speak. Don't assume that absence of sound equals safety. Remember the rules I learned the hard way. Study them, respect them, and teach them to anyone who might not survive their first encounter. And while you're thinking about this, check your own space. The dark corners. The closet you keep closed. That small, familiar room that feels harmless. Take a breath. Listen. Be aware, but careful. Ask questions, share experiences, theorize with friends. or write down what you notice. Anything to keep your mind alert without giving permission. Because the moment you think you understand it, the moment you grow confident or curious, it notices. It knows you, your routines, your weaknesses, and it doesn't forget. So as you sit there, reading this, consider how you've arranged your room tonight. Consider where your eyes might drift if you close them. And remember this, sometimes the thing waiting behind the closet isn't waiting for you to see it. It's waiting for you to forget that it's always been there.